My husband brought home a photograph of the $4,000 beauty collection I had dreamed about for years. Then he told me he had already given the real thing to his 32-year-old coworker. "A plain woman like you wouldn't know what to do with it," he said. He laughed when he said it. That was the part I couldn't forget. Not the price, not the makeup, the laugh. It happened on a Thursday in late October, the kind of gray Indiana morning when the sun never really decides to come out. My knees had been aching since I climbed out of bed, and I was standing at the ironing board in our kitchen, pressing the collar of Mark's white dress shirt while my coffee went cold beside the sink. He came downstairs already irritated. "This sleeve still has a crease," he said. I looked at the shirt hanging from the cabinet door. "That's where your elbow bends." "You know what I mean." After 23 years of marriage, I usually did know what Mark meant. Most of the time it meant he wanted something fixed without having to ask politely. My name is Linda Parker. I was 48 then, and I worked as the office manager for a family-owned HVAC company in Carmel, Indiana. I handled payroll, service calls, warranties, 3 technicians who never turned in receipts on time, and 1 owner who still printed every email. At home, I handled almost everything else. I scheduled the furnace inspections, paid the bills, remembered birthdays, picked up prescriptions for my mother, and kept track of which foods upset Mark's stomach before business trips. I had helped him through his MBA classes at Butler while Ethan was still in elementary school. Later, I worked overtime to help with Ethan's tuition at Purdue. None of that had felt like sacrifice at the time. It felt like marriage. Somewhere along the way, though, Mark started treating my effort like background noise. Reliable, useful, easy to ignore. He had become a regional sales director for Midwest Hospitality Supply, a company that sold furniture, linens, and spa equipment to hotels and private clubs. His job required tailored jackets, client dinners, and a lot of talk about presentation. My job, according to Mark, required comfortable shoes and a working phone. I had gained about 35 pounds over the years. Some of it came after knee surgery, some came from stress. Most of it came from eating whatever was left after taking care of everybody else. I stopped coloring my hair every 6 weeks. I stopped buying good foundation. I started cutting coupons for household products and telling myself I didn't care. The truth was, I still noticed beautiful things. Every December, Nordstrom displayed a limited edition beauty trunk near the cosmetics department. It came in a glossy, lacquered case with skincare, perfume, brushes, lip colors, and more little jars than I could name. It cost just under $4,000. I never seriously considered buying it. Still, I admired it. Once, while Mark and I were walking through the fashion mall at Keystone, I stopped in front of the display. "Can you imagine opening that?" I said. Mark barely looked up from his phone. "That stuff is highway robbery." I laughed and kept walking. 2 weeks before the incident, Mark's team closed a large contract with Bellamy Spa Resorts. He had spent months traveling between Indianapolis, Chicago, and Louisville, leaving me to host 2 client dinners at our house and rearrange my schedule whenever his flights changed. That Thursday evening, he came home unusually cheerful. "Big day," he announced, tossing his keys into the ceramic bowl by the door. He held out his phone. On the screen was a photograph of the exact beauty trunk I had admired. For a second, I thought he had remembered. I actually smiled. "Oh my goodness," I said. "Is that the Bellamy collection?" His expression changed slightly. Not guilt, more like amusement. "Yeah, they sent it over as part of the vendor appreciation program." I wiped my hands on a dish towel and stepped closer. "It's beautiful." "It was." I looked up. "What do you mean, was?" "I gave it to Ashley." He said it casually, then walked to the refrigerator and opened a bottle of sparkling water. Ashley Monroe worked in digital marketing at his company. I had met her twice. She was stylish, quick with compliments, and always holding her phone at an angle that suggested she might be recording something. I stared at Mark. "You gave it to Ashley?" "She did a lot of work on the Bellamy presentation." "So did you." "Exactly. It was mine to give." I folded the dish towel once, then again. "You knew I loved that set." He gave me a tired little smile, the one he used when he thought I was being unreasonable. "Linda, come on." I'm just asking why you didn't talk to me first. Because Ashley appreciates things like that. And I don't? He leaned against the counter and looked me over. My old cardigan, my black work pants, the gray roots I had not covered in 3 months. Half that stuff would expire before you figured out how to use it. I felt heat rise into my face. He should have stopped there. Instead, he laughed. A plain woman like you doesn't need $4,000 worth of makeup. The kitchen went quiet except for the refrigerator humming behind him. I thought about the hotel receipt I had found 8 years earlier, the one he said came from a sales conference delayed by a storm. I thought about the dinner where he told me not to stand at the edge of the company photograph because I looked tired. I thought about the time he questioned a $42 haircut, then bought himself an $1,100 watch because clients noticed details. For years, I had taken every cruel thing he said and translated it into something easier to live with. He's stressed. He didn't mean it. He's worried about money. That evening, I stopped translating. Mark left his credit card beside his wallet on the kitchen counter. He told me he was going to the gym and might meet a few people from work afterward. I picked up the card. My hand trembled. Not because I planned to ruin us financially, because after 23 years of marriage, spending money on myself without permission felt almost illegal. I called my sister Denise from the driveway. She listened without interrupting. Then she said, "Are you finally ready to stop asking Mark what you're allowed to be?" At 12:40 that afternoon, I parked at the fashion mall at Keystone. I bought 2 well-fitted outfits, a pair of comfortable leather shoes, and a handbag that did not have a broken zipper. Then I walked into Renew Salon and Studio, where a client had canceled at the last minute. The owner, Rebecca Alvarez, sat me in her chair and asked what I wanted. "I need to look different," I said. She studied me in the mirror. "Different for him?" I swallowed. "I don't know." "Then let's start with familiar to you." That was when I cried, not loudly, just enough that she handed me a tissue and waited. Over the next 3 hours, Rebecca cut my hair to my shoulders, softened the gray instead of hiding all of it, and showed me how to use makeup without covering my face. I changed into a dark green blouse and straight-leg pants that actually fit. I did not look younger. I looked awake. Before driving home, I made one more stop. Susan Keller's law office was closing, but the receptionist let me schedule a consultation for Monday. She handed me an information packet and Susan's card. I placed both inside my new handbag. At nearly 6 o'clock, I opened my front door. Mark was sitting on the couch. He looked up. For several seconds, he stared at me as though he had forgotten I could look like anything other than tired. Then he noticed the shopping bags. His face hardened. "Tell me you didn't use our card." I set my handbag on the kitchen counter. "I did." His smile disappeared. Mark stood up so fast the remote control slid off the couch and landed on the hardwood floor. "You did what?" "I used the card." "For how much?" I took a slow breath before answering. "Just under $5,000. His eyes widened. $5,000? He looked at the shopping bags as if they contained bricks of gold. "Linda, have you completely lost your mind?" I calmly hung my new jacket in the front closet before answering. "No." "You spent almost $5,000 because your feelings got hurt?" "My feelings didn't get hurt, Mark. They obviously did." He grabbed one of the bags and started pulling out boxes. New shoes, a handbag, skincare products, a few makeup items. He held up the receipt like evidence in a murder trial. $1,000 at Nordstrom? It was less than that. "That isn't the point." "No," I said quietly. "It isn't." He threw the receipt onto the kitchen island. "This all goes back tomorrow." "No!" His head snapped toward me. "What?" I said no. You don't get to decide that. I already did. His face turned bright red. For years, if Mark raised his voice, I would automatically lower mine. I thought it kept the peace. Now I realized all it really did was teach him that louder always won. "You're acting like a spoiled teenager. And you gave a $4,000 gift to another woman." "That was different." "How?" "It didn't cost us anything." I looked him straight in the eye. Neither did 23 years of everything I did for this family. For the first time in a very long time. Mark had no immediate answer, not because he agreed, because he had never expected me to say something back. He finally scoffed. "You're being ridiculous." "Maybe. But I'm done pretending your version is the only one that matters." He picked up his phone. I watched his thumbs move rapidly across the screen. "What are you doing?" "Fixing this." A few seconds later, my own phone buzzed. "Your credit card has been temporarily suspended." I stared at the notification. Mark looked almost satisfied. "There. You froze the account? You've proven you can't be trusted. Our account. My income pays that balance." "My paycheck goes into that account too," he laughed. "Linda, your paycheck barely covers groceries." I wish I could tell you that I fired back with some brilliant speech. I didn't. That sentence hurt more than the one about makeup. Because it wasn't really about money, it was about value. In his mind, my income was grocery money. His income built our future. My work at home wasn't work at all. I quietly picked up my overnight bag and walked toward the guest bedroom. "Where are you going?" "To sleep." "You're seriously giving me the silent treatment?" "No," I looked back. "I'm giving myself some peace." I closed the door before he could answer. I barely slept. Every time I drifted off, I replayed that laugh. Not the words, the laugh. It sounded like someone who had already decided you didn't matter. Around midnight, I reached for my phone. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. I simply couldn't sleep. Then I saw Ashley's newest Instagram post. She stood beside the beauty trunk. The lid was open, the products were spread across a marble bathroom counter. Her caption read, "Some people know exactly how a woman deserves to be treated." My stomach tightened. Then I noticed something else. Mark had liked the post. He had even left a little champagne glass emoji underneath. I took screenshots. Not because I thought they would help legally, because I suddenly realized I had spent years doubting my own memory. I wasn't going to do that anymore. The next morning, Mark acted strangely cheerful, as though the fight had never happened. He even brought home coffee from Starbucks. "1 caramel macchiato," he said. "My favorite." He set it on the kitchen counter. I overreacted. I looked at him carefully. "Did you?" I was frustrated. "So was I," he smiled. "Let's just move on." Move on. That had become his favorite solution to every uncomfortable conversation. Move on. Forget it. Don't make everything such a big deal. I almost accepted the coffee. Almost. Then his phone lit up. Ashley. He flipped it over so quickly he nearly knocked it off the counter. I pretended not to notice. He pretended nothing had happened. Monday morning, I met with Susan Keller. Her office overlooked a quiet street in downtown Carmel. No dramatic music, no expensive conference room. Just bookshelves, framed degrees, and someone who had clearly spent decades listening before speaking. She didn't ask me why I wanted revenge. She asked practical questions. "How long have you been married?" 23 years. "Any children?" "One son. 25. "Mortgage?" "Yes." "Retirement accounts?" "I don't actually know all the details." She looked up. "Who manages your investments?" "Mark." "All of them?" "I handle the household bills. He handles retirement." Susan nodded thoughtfully. "That arrangement isn't unusual." Then she asked the question that stayed with me for weeks. "Linda, if you had to buy groceries tomorrow without Mark, could you?" "Yes." "If you had to retire without understanding your finances?" I couldn't answer, because I honestly didn't know. For the first time, I understood something terrifying. I knew the price of milk, the property taxes, the electric bill, but I couldn't have told you how much money we actually had. Susan didn't criticize me. She simply handed me a yellow legal pad. "I'd like you to start gathering documents." She listed tax returns, retirement statements, credit card records, bank statements, bonus information, mortgage paperwork. Then she looked directly at me. Don't threaten your husband. Don't empty accounts. Don't destroy anything. Just collect information. I nodded. She smiled gently. You'd be surprised how many cases become clear once the paperwork starts talking. That afternoon, I returned home early. Mark wasn't there. I sat down at the desktop computer we both used for printing travel itineraries and tax forms. I wasn't searching for an affair. I was looking for Bellamy, the luxury spa company. Mark had once shown me an email about the appreciation program. Maybe I had imagined it, maybe not. I searched the company folder. One email appeared, then another. Then one document caught my eye. Bellamy Household Appreciation Recognition. I opened it. The letter explained that Bellamy wanted to recognize the families whose support made the project successful. Employees could nominate one household recipient. Near the bottom, I stopped breathing. The original draft listed recipient Linda Parker below it. A revision, recipient Ashley Monroe. The document history showed exactly who made the change. Mark Parker, date, time. Electronic approval. He hadn't simply decided to give Ashley a nice gift. He had deliberately removed my name. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Then I quietly printed every page. When the printer stopped humming, I realized something. The makeup had never really been the point. Neither had Ashley. The point was that somewhere along the way, my husband had stopped seeing me as the person who deserved appreciation, and he had put that decision in writing. I carried the printed emails into Susan Keller's office the next morning. She didn't react the way I expected. She didn't gasp. She didn't shake her head. She simply read every page twice, placed them neatly into a file, and folded her hands. This may not decide your divorce, she said, but it tells me something important about your husband. What? He was willing to rewrite reality if it benefited him. That sentence stayed with me, not because it was dramatic, because it explained 23 years in one line. Susan spent the next hour asking me questions I never thought I would have to answer. How much is left on your mortgage? I think around $130,000. How much is in Mark's 401k? I'm not sure. What's the balance on your home equity line? I don't know. Every answer I didn't know embarrassed me. I had managed our household for decades. I could tell you exactly when our water heater had last been serviced. I knew Ethan's old allergies. I remembered my mother's medication schedule without writing it down, but I couldn't tell you how much money my husband had saved for retirement. Susan must have seen the shame on my face. Linda, she said gently, this happens more often than you think. I feel foolish. No, she shook her head. You trusted someone you married. That isn't foolish. Then she leaned forward. But from today on, trust has to be supported by facts. Mark figured out something had changed. Maybe it was because I stopped asking where he had been. Maybe it was because I no longer tried to make conversation over dinner. Or maybe people like Mark simply notice when they stop controlling the emotional temperature of the house. 3 days later, I logged into our online banking. Or tried to. My password no longer worked. I reset it using the recovery email attached to my account. When I finally got in, I noticed something immediately. $18,000 had disappeared from our joint savings account. I called Mark. What happened to the money? I moved it. Why? To protect it. From who? You. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because I couldn't believe I was hearing it. You're protecting our savings from your wife? From someone who's spending irrationally. It was one shopping trip. It was almost $5,000. And the Bellamy gift? Silence. Then he changed the subject. If you're planning something stupid, I'm making sure you don't bankrupt us. I looked out my office window toward the employee parking lot. For the first time since all this began, I felt real fear, not anger, fear. I was 48 years old. My knees hurt almost every morning. My mother still needed help with appointments. I earned a decent salary, but not enough to casually start over. What if Mark emptied every account? What if I couldn't afford a lawyer? What if I lost the house? That afternoon, for nearly an hour, I almost convinced myself to apologize. Not because I thought he was right, because starting over sounded terrifying. Susan stopped that spiral before it went too far. She filed for temporary financial protection through the court. She explained everything in plain English. No judge likes one spouse moving money around after divorce becomes likely. So, he can't just drain everything. He can try. And judges tend to notice. For the first time all week, I slept almost 6 hours. The hardest part wasn't Mark. It was Ethan. Mark called him before I did. I found that out when my phone rang Saturday morning. Mom? Hi, sweetheart. He hesitated. Dad told me you spent almost $5,000 because he gave a business gift to somebody at work. I closed my eyes. Did he tell you anything else? He said you're talking about divorce. Yes. There was another long silence. Finally, Ethan sighed. I know Dad says insensitive things sometimes. Sometimes. He does. But ending a 23-year marriage over makeup? There it was. The story Mark wanted everyone to believe. I sat down on the edge of my bed. It isn't about makeup. I know. Do you? Another pause. Mom, did Dad hit you? No. Did he threaten you? No. Then maybe counseling, Ethan. I interrupted him softly. Have you ever watched someone slowly disappear? What? You don't notice it day to day. But one morning you realize the person you used to know isn't there anymore. He didn't answer. I love you, I said. I always will. But I can't explain 23 years in one phone call. After we hung up, I cried harder than I had after Mark insulted me. Because children, even grown ones, want to believe the safer story. And the safer story was that his parents were fighting over a makeup set, not that his father had spent years teaching his mother she deserved less. The following Tuesday, Susan called. I've started reviewing older financial records. Anything? Yes. There are recurring expense reports from about 8 years ago. My stomach tightened. 8 years. Exactly when my mother was going through chemotherapy. Exactly when Mark traveled almost every week. Susan continued. Several hotel stays. Jewelry purchases. Restaurant charges. All coded as client development. I closed my office door. Do you recognize the dates? I think I do. That night, I dug through old storage boxes in the basement. Tax files, instruction manuals, Christmas ornaments. Finally, inside a faded accordion folder, I found it, the hotel receipt, the one I had discovered years ago. I remembered standing in this same basement while Mark explained everything. The interstate closed. Everyone stayed overnight. Don't make something out of nothing. Back then, I wanted to believe him. Ethan had just started applying to Purdue. Mom had lost her hair from chemotherapy. I couldn't survive another crisis, so I chose peace instead of truth. Now, the dates matched Susan's records almost perfectly. The same restaurants, the same city, the same expense descriptions. It wasn't proof of an affair, but it was proof of a pattern. That evening, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered. Linda? Yes? This is Ashley. Every muscle in my body tightened. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. You're right. I deserve that. She sounded nervous, not defensive. I need to tell you something. I don't think there's anything we need to discuss. There is. She took a shaky breath. Mark lied to me. I didn't say anything. He told me you hated makeup. He said your marriage had basically been over for years. He said you stayed together because of finances. I laughed bitterly. That sounds familiar. I found something yesterday. What? A picture from an old company Christmas party. With Mark. And another woman. Natalie Brooks. The name hit me immediately. I remembered her, a sales coordinator. She had disappeared years ago. Ashley continued quietly. I contacted her. My heartbeat quickened. She sent me screenshots. Of what? Messages from Mark. I felt my stomach drop. What did they say? Ashley's voice became almost a whisper. The same things he told me. He said you didn't love him anymore. He said you were basically roommates. He said you'd never leave because... She stopped. Because what? Because you didn't have the nerve. A few seconds later, a screenshot appeared on my phone. The message was dated 8 years earlier. It was from Mark. Linda won't leave. She doesn't have the nerve or the money. A second message followed from Ashley. I think he lied to both of us, and I think he's been lying to your company too. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. This wasn't one mistake. It wasn't one coworker. It wasn't even one marriage problem. It was a script. And Mark had been reading from it for years. For almost an hour after Ashley texted me, I just sat in my car outside my apartment complex. I never started the engine. The screenshot stayed open on my phone. Linda won't leave. She doesn't have the nerve or the money. 8 years. He had written that 8 years ago. The strange thing was, I wasn't crying anymore. I was embarrassed, not because Mark had lied, because he'd been right. For years I really had believed I couldn't make it without him. That realization hurt more than the messages. Ashley suggested meeting somewhere public. I almost deleted her text. Instead, we agreed to meet Saturday morning at the Panera Bread near Castleton. She was already there when I walked in. No designer clothes, no perfect makeup. Just jeans, a sweater, and a paper cup of coffee she barely touched. She looked nervous. I stayed standing. You have 10 minutes. I deserve that. Probably, she nodded. I knew he was married. I assumed you did. But he told me, she hesitated. He said you were basically roommates. I didn't answer. He said you stopped caring years ago. He said you only stayed because it was financially convenient. I almost laughed. Financially convenient. I had spent 23 years stretching grocery budgets, delaying dental work, and putting off replacing my car so Mark could build his career. Convenient wasn't exactly the word I would have chosen. Ashley reached into her purse. I brought my phone. I figured. There are things you should see. She handed it to me. Message after message. Mark complained that I had given up. He claimed I spent my evenings watching television while he carried the family. He told Ashley he had paid for Ethan's education almost by himself. He complained about driving my mother to chemotherapy appointments because they stole weekends. The last message made my stomach turn. Linda doesn't even notice me anymore. I quietly handed the phone back. That's interesting. What? He never complained about any of those things to me. Ashley looked confused. He didn't? No. He expected me to keep doing them. She stared down into her coffee. I know you probably hate me. I don't know you well enough to hate you. She gave a sad little smile. I wasn't trying to steal your husband. You still accepted expensive gifts. I did. And that was wrong. She didn't argue. I believed him. So did I. Those words surprised both of us. Because they were true. We had believed different versions of exactly the same man. Ashley took another slow breath. There's more. I waited. He asked me to submit expense reports. What kind? Dinners? Hotels? Client entertainment? Were they legitimate? Some were. And some? She looked away. I don't think so. She explained that Mark often told her to charge personal dinners to the Bellamy account. He always had a reason. It'll be fixed, later. The client joined us for dessert. This is how sales works. Ashley admitted she never questioned him, until Bellamy's compliance department emailed everyone involved in the account. Then she started comparing receipts, dates, locations, hotel stays. Nothing fit together anymore. He told me not to worry. And did you? At first. She reached into her purse again. This time she handed me a small flash drive. There are copies. I looked at it without touching it. I don't want anything illegally obtained. They're my expense reports. My emails. My approvals. My attorney said I could keep copies. That answer impressed me. She had already spoken to a lawyer. Maybe she was finally realizing Mark wasn't going to protect her either. I slid the flash drive into my purse. I'm giving this to Susan. That's why I brought it. Mark somehow found out we had met. I still don't know how. Maybe Ashley told him. Maybe someone from Panera recognized us. Maybe he simply guessed. He was waiting in our driveway when I came home. His arms were crossed. What did Ashley tell you? I unlocked the front door. We had coffee. You've been talking behind my back. I stopped. Behind your back? He stepped closer. She's trying to save herself. Maybe. And you're stupid enough to believe her. I looked at him carefully. You've said that about 2 women now. His expression changed. Just for a fraction of a second. Enough. Who else? He asked. You tell me. He said nothing. That silence answered my question better than words ever could. Over the next week, Mark became someone I barely recognized. One moment he apologized, the next he attacked. One evening he brought flowers, another evening he accused me of ruining his career. He even called Ethan again. Later, my son admitted what Mark had told him. He said, "You've become emotionally unstable." I stared at Ethan. What else? He blamed menopause. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because after 23 years, Mark had finally found a medical explanation for why I disagreed with him. Ethan looked uncomfortable. I didn't believe that part. Did you believe any of it? He hesitated. I didn't know what to believe. That honest answer hurt less than blind loyalty would have. 2 nights later, Mark knocked softly on the guest room door. Can we talk? I almost said no. Instead, I opened it. He looked exhausted. His tie was gone. His shoulders slumped. I messed up. You did. I never should have called you plain. No. I've been under a lot of pressure. I stayed quiet. The Bellamy account. My promotion. Turning 50. He rubbed both hands over his face. I started feeling invisible. For the first time, he sounded almost sincere. He reminded me of our first apartment. The tiny kitchen where we danced while frozen pizza baked. The night Ethan was born. My knee surgery years later when he slept in a hospital chair because he didn't want me waking up alone. Those memories were real. They belonged to us. For one dangerous moment, I almost believed we could find our way back. Then he reached into his briefcase. I need one favor. My stomach tightened. What? A statement. He pulled out a typed document. It just says the $18,000 transfer was something we both agreed on. I looked up slowly. You want me to lie? It'll simplify everything. No, it protects both of us. No, Mark. His eyes hardened instantly. The tears disappeared, his shoulders straightened. Just like that, the vulnerable husband vanished. The negotiator came back. You really are going through with this. I am. He folded the paper and put it away. You'll regret it. Maybe. But I knew one thing for certain. I would regret signing that paper much longer. 3 days later, Ethan came to see me after work. He looked uncomfortable standing in my kitchen. I owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything. I do. He pulled out his phone. Ashley sent me something. I froze. She sent me the original Bellamy approval. He swallowed. And Dad's message saying you'd never leave because you didn't have the money. He looked ashamed. I wanted to believe him. I know. I didn't want my childhood to change. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. It doesn't have to. He looked confused. You can still love your father, but don't ever help him lie. He nodded slowly. I won't. A week later, an invitation arrived in the mail, Midwest Hospitality Supply Annual Bellamy Appreciation. Dinner location: the Conrad, Indianapolis. Guest: Linda Parker. Mark had told me spouses weren't invited. He lied. Again, that same afternoon Susan called. You should attend. I don't want a scene. Then don't create one. What if Mark does? Susan paused. Linda, sometimes the strongest thing you can do is quietly show up. I looked at the invitation one more time. For years I had entered those company events as someone's wife. This time, I would walk in as myself. The night before the dinner, Mark received an email from corporate compliance requesting an immediate meeting regarding the Bellamy account and several expense reports. He stormed into the kitchen holding his phone. What did you send them? I looked up from my tea. Nothing. That was the truth. I hadn't sent a single document. Ashley had. And for the first time since I'd met her, Mark understood something. Neither of the women he had manipulated was protecting him anymore. The Bellamy Appreciation Dinner was held at the Conrad, Indianapolis, on a chilly Friday evening in early December. I almost didn't go. I changed outfits 3 times. The dark green dress Rebecca had helped me choose suddenly felt too elegant. The navy one looked too plain. Then I laughed at myself. Months earlier, I would have worried about looking too old. Now I was worried about looking like I was trying too hard. Rebecca had given me one piece of advice before I left. Walk in like you belong there. I don't, she smiled. You hosted client dinners, you packed suitcases, you answered late-night calls from hotels when Mark forgot medications. You absolutely belong there. I carried those words with me all the way from Carmel to downtown Indianapolis. My knees complained as I crossed the parking garage toward the hotel. The cold air made the ache worse. For one brief second, I considered turning around, driving home, making soup, watching television, pretending none of this had happened. It would have been easier. But easier had cost me 23 years. I kept walking. The ballroom glittered with Christmas lights and white poinsettias. Bellamy executives stood near the entrance, greeting employees and their families. One of Mark's former managers spotted me first. Linda? I turned. It was Steve Reynolds. He had retired 2 years earlier. His face lit up. Well, look at you. I laughed nervously. It's just a haircut. No. He smiled warmly. You look happy. Nobody had ever complimented me quite like that before. Not prettier, not younger, happier. Somehow that meant more. Mark saw me a few moments later. I watched his smile disappear before he managed to replace it with one for the people standing nearby. He walked over. I didn't expect you. I was invited. His eyes flicked toward the registration table. You checked? I read the invitation. He lowered his voice. This isn't the place. For what? Our problems. I agree. His expression tightened. For the first time since we'd met, I realized something. Mark wasn't embarrassed by what he had done. He was embarrassed that people might find out. Those are 2 very different things. Dinner began with speeches about teamwork, partnerships, and another successful year. I listened politely. When dessert arrived, Bellamy's vice president stepped onto the stage. She thanked employees. Then she thanked families. I'd also like to recognize the spouses and loved ones who supported our team through months of travel. Several photographs appeared on the large screen. Employees, children, holiday dinners, home offices. Then another slide appeared. A picture of the luxury beauty trunk. The Bellamy executive smiled. This special appreciation gift was designed to honor one family member whose behind-the-scenes support made the project possible. My heartbeat sped up. She continued. Our records show the recipient as Ashley Monroe. A puzzled expression crossed her face. I thought... She looked toward one of the compliance managers seated nearby. He quietly stood, walked over, whispered something. The room became strangely still. The vice president recovered gracefully. We'll revisit that presentation later. She moved on. Most guests probably didn't think much of it. I noticed Mark gripping his water glass so tightly his knuckles had turned white. After dinner, people gathered in smaller groups. I was speaking with Steve and his wife when a woman wearing a Bellamy name badge approached me. "Mrs. Parker?" "Yes. I'm sorry to interrupt." She smiled professionally. "Would you mind stepping over here for just a moment?" Mark immediately appeared. "I can answer whatever questions you have." The compliance director looked at him. "I'd actually like to hear from Mrs. Parker." We walked a few steps away, not into another room. Not onto a stage, just to a quieter corner of the ballroom. "Mrs. Parker," the woman asked gently, "did your husband tell you that you had been nominated to receive the Bellamy Appreciation Collection?" "No. Did you decline it?" "No," she nodded once. "Thank you." That was all. No accusations, no dramatic confrontation, just two simple questions, and two truthful answers. Across the room, Ashley had been speaking with another employee. She noticed the conversation and slowly walked over. Mark got there first. "Ashley," he said sharply, "tell them there was some confusion." Ashley looked at him for several long seconds. Then she turned toward the compliance director. "There wasn't confusion." Mark stared at her. "You changed the recipient yourself," Ashley continued quietly. "I have the original email." Someone nearby stopped talking. Another person looked over. Nobody interrupted. Nobody needed to. Ashley wasn't trying to embarrass Mark. She was simply refusing to lie for him. Then she added something I hadn't expected. "He also asked me to classify several personal dinners and one hotel stay as Bellamy account expenses." Mark's face lost all color. "That's not what happened." Ashley didn't argue. She simply handed the compliance director a folder. "I've already provided copies." Mark looked around the room, searching, calculating, trying to decide who still believed him. Then he saw Ethan. Our son had arrived after finishing work. He walked directly toward us. "Ethan," Mark said quickly, "tell them your mother's blowing this out of proportion." Ethan looked at his father, then at me. He took a slow breath. "I can't do that." Mark blinked. "What?" "I've seen the emails." "Ethan, I've seen the original Bellamy nomination." My son spoke calmly, not angrily. "Mom didn't change the paperwork." "You did." The silence around us became almost uncomfortable. Nobody clapped, nobody gasped, people simply watched. Sometimes the quietest moments carry the most weight. A compliance manager approached Mark. "We'll need to collect the Bellamy trunk this evening." "It was already opened." "I understand. The inventory will determine reimbursement." For a split second, I almost laughed. Months earlier, Mark had mocked me for wanting expensive cosmetics. Now he was discussing used lipstick and opened moisturizer with a corporate auditor. Life has an odd sense of humor. The evening officially ended about 20 minutes later. Guests slowly began leaving. I was putting on my coat when Mark caught up with me near the elevators. His confidence was gone. "Linda," I stopped. "We need to talk." "I don't think we do." "My career," his voice cracked. "They're talking about suspending me." I waited. Ashley ruined everything. I shook my head. "No, you did." He rubbed both hands over his face. "It wasn't supposed to go this far." I reached into my handbag. For one strange moment, I remembered standing in that same mall parking lot months earlier, terrified to spend money on myself. It felt like another lifetime. I handed him a large envelope. He frowned. "What's this?" "You'll find out." He opened it. His shoulders sagged. Divorce papers. He stared at the first page without speaking. Finally, he whispered, 23 years. "Yes. Doesn't that count for something?" "It does." I nodded. "That's why I stayed through hundreds of smaller moments before this one." His eyes filled with tears. "I'll quit my job. I'll go to counseling. I'll buy you another beauty collection." There it was, even now. He still thought this was about replacing an object. I looked at him with more sadness than anger. "I never needed $4,000 worth of makeup." He waited. "I needed a husband who didn't enjoy making me feel small." The elevator doors opened behind me. I stepped inside. Just before they closed, Mark called out one last time. "You'll regret starting over at your age." The doors slid shut. As the elevator descended, my hands began to shake. Because if I was honest, that was exactly what frightened me most, not losing Mark, starting over at 48, alone. People often imagine divorce as one dramatic day. It wasn't. It was hundreds of ordinary days. Days of signing paperwork during my lunch break, days of packing dishes into cardboard boxes while deciding whether I really needed a second crock pot, days of comparing health insurance plans and learning more about retirement accounts than I ever wanted to know. The hardest part wasn't leaving. It was building a life I had never expected to build at 48. By the following spring, the divorce was final. The house sold faster than either of us expected. Watching strangers walk through the living room where Ethan had taken his first steps nearly broke me. Every room held a memory. The hallway, where we measured his height every birthday. The kitchen, where Mark and I used to dance while frozen pizza baked in the oven. The back deck where my mother spent one beautiful September afternoon wrapped in a blanket, watching hummingbirds at the feeder. Some memories deserved to stay memories. I couldn't keep the house just to protect them. The equity was divided fairly. Neither of us got everything we wanted. Neither of us walked away ruined. Susan often reminded me that good divorce settlements rarely feel like victories. They feel balanced. She was right. The court also included the $18,000 Mark had transferred in the marital estate after Susan documented the timing of the transaction. His attempt to move the money didn't disappear. It simply became part of the financial picture the judge considered. Mark wasn't punished for being a bad husband. He was held accountable for making financial decisions that affected both of us. There was something comforting about that distinction. Professionally, things unfolded more quietly than people might imagine. Bellamy completed its internal investigation. Midwest Hospitality Supply did the same. Mark wasn't marched out of the building. Nobody escorted him to the parking lot. Instead, the Bellamy account was reassigned. His annual bonus was withheld while the expense reports were reviewed. A few weeks later, he resigned. Some people assumed he had accepted another opportunity. Those who knew the full story didn't gossip much. Most of them simply moved on with their own lives. Real life isn't a television drama. Companies generally prefer paperwork over public humiliation. Ashley kept her job. That surprised me at first. Then Susan explained why. She accepted something she shouldn't have accepted, she said. But she also cooperated, returned what remained of the gift, and admitted her mistakes. One afternoon, I received a text from Ashley. "I'm sorry for the part I played." I stared at it for several minutes. Then I replied, "I believe you're sorry. I hope you make better choices in the future." That was enough. Forgiveness doesn't always become friendship. Sometimes it simply means refusing to carry bitterness any longer. Moving into my apartment felt strange. It was a modest 2-bedroom place in Carmel with beige carpeting that looked exactly like every apartment carpet I'd ever seen. The building didn't have an elevator. Every grocery trip reminded my knees of that fact. Money was tighter than before. I created my first budget based entirely on my own paycheck. No hidden accounts. No wondering whether someone else had moved money overnight. Some months were uncomfortable. I delayed replacing my aging Honda. I learned how to fix small things around the apartment by watching online videos. I even discovered I enjoyed quiet Saturday mornings with nowhere I had to be. There were lonely evenings, too. I missed having someone ask how my day had gone. Sometimes I even missed Mark, not the man he became, the young husband who once danced with me in a tiny apartment kitchen before either of us had enough money to worry about appearances. Grief has a funny way of mixing memories together. It doesn't separate the good from the bad nearly as neatly as we'd like. Ethan started visiting almost every Sunday. The first few weeks felt awkward. He'd bring coffee and donuts. We'd talk about road construction, weather, football, almost anything except the divorce. Then one afternoon, while helping me assemble a bookshelf, he finally put down the screwdriver. "Mom?" "Yeah?" "I'm still angry." "I know." "Not at you." He stared at the floor. At myself. I didn't interrupt. I kept waiting for Dad to do something obviously terrible. He swallowed. I thought if he wasn't yelling or hitting anyone, maybe things weren't that bad. I understood exactly what he meant. When you're raised inside a certain kind of marriage, normal becomes difficult to measure. I walked over and hugged him. You don't have to spend the rest of your life apologizing. I know. I just wish I'd seen it sooner. So do I. We stood there for a moment without speaking. Then I smiled. Now help me figure out why this bookshelf has 3 extra screws. He laughed. I was wondering when you'd notice. It was the first time we'd laughed together in months. It felt good. About 6 months after the divorce, Rebecca asked whether I would help with a Saturday workshop at her salon. She had started offering low-cost sessions for women returning to work after illness, caregiving, retirement, or divorce. I don't need someone to teach makeup, she told me. I need someone who knows how to organize people. Office managers never really stop being office managers. So, once a month, I handled registrations, answered phones, arranged refreshments, and made sure everyone left with appointment cards instead of confusion. One Saturday, a woman named Carol sat in front of the mirror holding a lipstick. She had to be in her late 60s. She looked at me and smiled nervously. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Will this make me look younger?" I looked at her reflection. Then I caught my own. The gray around my temples had started showing again. I had regained a few pounds. My knees still reminded me every morning that I wasn't 30 anymore. I wasn't the polished woman who had walked through my front door carrying shopping bags months earlier. I was simply me. And for the first time in years, that felt like enough. I smiled at Carol. "No," she laughed. "I figured. But it might remind you that you're still here." She looked at herself in the mirror again. Then she bought the lipstick. Not because she expected it to erase the years, because she'd decided the years were worth showing up for. People still ask me whether I divorced Mark because he gave another woman an expensive beauty collection. The answer is no. The makeup was never the real story. It simply exposed something I had spent years refusing to see. Mark believed some women existed to impress. Others existed to support him quietly without asking for appreciation. For too long, I accepted being the second kind. The afternoon I drove to the mall, I thought I was buying clothes, a haircut, and a little confidence. Looking back, I understand I bought something much more valuable. 5 uninterrupted hours in which I made decisions without asking someone else's permission. Everything else came after that. If you've ever stayed in a relationship because leaving felt more frightening than being unhappy, please know you're not alone. Sometimes the smallest moment reveals the truth you've been trying not to see for years. Thank you for spending this time with me, and if this story spoke to you, I'd love to hear your thoughts.